Because basically that's what it was, building churches. All right, John the 18th chapter. The first thing we have here is Bill's buddy, old Judas. Judas. What does Judas mean? How do you say Judas in Hebrew, Brother Roger? Yehudah. All right, Yehudah. Yehudah means praise Jehovah. All right. And when Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples. What is this word for disciples? Habitual learners. Habitual learners. All right, it's mathetes, habitual learners. Over the ravine of the Kidron, where there was a garden in which he himself entered, and his disciples. All right. Now, every disciple was not with him, was it? Now, what had happened just prior to this? What had happened just prior to this? How do we get to this point in the Scriptures? Who's speaking, who's he speaking to, and what's the subject? What had happened just prior to this? They had the Lord's Supper. The Lord instituted his supper into the church. He basically, what he did is that he dissolved the Passover, said this is the last, and he changed the Passover to the Lord's Supper, and he turned the Passover, which was a family-oriented religious service, to a church-oriented religious, what we call a ordinance, a church ordinance. There are two church ordinances. What are they? Baptism and the Lord's Supper. All right. And so he had instituted the Lord's Supper. They sang a song. Then they got to arguing about things and asking questions. Now Jesus is going over to Gethsemane, where he's going to suffer and pray. All right. We had his high priestly prayer over there in the 17th chapter. And so now Judas comes on the scene, the rat. Now Judas was not a preordained rat, yet he was. Judas is the only disciple in the Old Testament that the Old Testament prophesied that he would be, and he prophesied in several places where he was in the Psalms and different places where he was going to betray the Lord. This is the only disciple that has a prophecy of him, and that's Judas.
You said he wasn't preordained to do that. It's that his sin did it, the devil.
What I was going to continue to say is that predestination. All right. Now the Bible knew that Judas would do this because God is what? Omniscient. He knows this. Now did God grab old Judas out by the neck and say, you do this, you have no will? No. Judas could have been saved. He could have done all the things that the other did. Matter of fact, Judas is an apostle. He joins the church. He's got two offices in the church. What are they? Treasurer and apostle. Yet he was not saved, was he? He was not a saved man. But he had a volition. He had volition. And so he made the decision knowledgeably because he was a thief. I'm going to be teaching on Do You Love Me this morning. Do you know that there's a word for filio or phileo or philos in Greek that ends up with being to love or to desire or to have a passion for stealing? Judas Iscariot had a passion for stealing. He loved to steal. He loved to steal. He had a passion. He had an affection for taking things that were not somebody else's. Yes, Brother X.
He was not a Galilean.
He came from Hebron area. Judas Iscariot. Judas, man from Carioth. All right, man from Carioth. That's what his name means, which was near Hebron. Okay? Let's go on a little bit further. Now Judas, who was betraying, kept on betraying him. Judas betrayed him because God gave him a great opportunity to serve God. He gave him a treasure. You know, anything you do in a church is a place of service where you can glorify God. And a treasurer can glorify God, but what did he do? Basically, he blasphemed God. He was a thief. About like a politician. But politicians up there, they will take your money. And do something with it, no good. Period. Not what you pay taxes for. Taxes are good if they use them for the right thing. but not if they go make themselves rich and take care of themselves for the rest of their lives. They serve for 4 years or 2 years, and then they're on the dole forever. And they gripe about people being county employees and getting retirement. Let them put the shoe on the other foot, okay? Well, Judas had a great opportunity to serve the Lord. He was an apostle. He had the power to do miracles. Do you think Judas didn't believe that Jesus had power? He could display that power. Jesus had the ability to transfer his power to others, and he transferred that power to Judas. And yet, Judas always went the wrong way, because that's what Judas wanted to do. Now, Judas, who was always betraying him, knew the place, for Jesus had often met there with his church members. That word mathetes, habitual learner, these are church members, because the church is in existence. And now we have in verse number 3 a mistranslation in almost every Bible. So put your little thinking hat on here. Okay? Put your thinking hat on. Now, we know, we've read Pontius Pilate's letter, which is a verified letter. We've verified it historically from many sources. Pontius Pilate would try to protect Jesus, didn't he? Do you think Pontius Pilate was conscious of what they were going to do right here? He knew that they were going to do this. Do you think Pontius Pilate would have abetted them? No way. So, now, since we have people that don't read Pontius Pilate's letter and don't have the background, we've got to make a wrong translation here. Judas then, having received the Roman cohort, that's what it says. Now, that is wrong. A cohort, what it is spera kiliarchos. This basically means Herod had temple guards, temple soldiers. This was his bodyguard elite soldiers, okay? And evidently he had a kiliarchos. That means what? A kilo is what? 1,000. They say that this is at least 600 to 1,000 temple soldiers. Pontius Pilate had nothing to do with this. This is not Roman cohort.
He only had 100, 150.
That's right.
Roman.
He didn't have that many.
Yeah.
Here we got 600 to 1,000 temple guards, which is basically Herod's assassins. Okay? And officers from the chief priest. See, it tells you who. This is not Roman cohort now. All right? This is not a Roman cohort. And the chief priests and the Pharisees. Here we have the head priests. The head priests and the Pharisees came with lanterns and torches and what? Weapons. Were they supposed to have any weapons on them during a festival holiday? No way. So they were breaking their own laws. They're out at nighttime doing what they're not supposed to. They're supposed to do all this in the daylight. They're supposed to arrest people in the daylight so they make sure they got the right guy. But they're acting like absolute thieves and outlaws in the night. And there came with lanterns and torches and weapons which they were not supposed to be carrying. And Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that were coming upon him, went forth and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" See, that's in the red letter Bible. That's in red. That's Jesus' words right there now.
Excuse me, Jim.
Yes.
Because they were under Roman rule, they weren't allowed to carry weapons, were they?
They had weapons. Yeah. These are Herod's soldiers. These are the temple guards. They had weapons, but they weren't supposed to carry weapons on a holiday, on a feast day, on a religious period of time. They were not allowed to carry weapons. Okay? And we have Judas, and we have one other guy. I'm not Judas, but we have Peter and one other guy carrying weapons too. We're going to find that out in a minute. Two of them had two swords.
Herod is the first non-Jewish king over the Jews.
Yes, because Antony and Cleopatra appointed him. This is not that one. This is his father. Okay, this is way back. This is the Herod, Herod the Great. This is not Herod the Great here. Okay, but he's a descendant of him. Okay. All right, and they had split the empire up in 3 portions when after he died. And he went forth and said to him, Who do you seek? And they answered him, Jesus the Nazarene. Now, why did they call him the Nazarene? There's a lot of difference between the Nazarene and the Nazarite, isn't there?
The Nazarene come from the town. The Nazarite took the vow.
That's right. The Nazarite, basically a Nazarite was a volunteer priest, is what he was. He was he stayed away from women. He didn't drink any wine. He didn't eat any grapes. There was a lot of things that he could not do that everybody else did. And when the priests were in service, they couldn't do that. But this guy is that way all the time. The priests only couldn't drink wine, and they couldn't be with their wives only when they were serving. But when they went home and somebody else took their place, they could be with their wives, they could drink wine, they could eat grapes, all this kind of stuff. But the Nazarite didn't do this at all. And not only that, he didn't cut his hair. Okay, you can tell a Nazarite because he had long hair. Yes, Sister Andina.
Like Samson? He was
Samson was a Nazarite. Yes, he was a Nazarite. He was what we call a volunteer priest. As the priests were in service, they should always be. Okay, John the Baptist was a Nazarite. A Nazarite. He took the vow of the Nazarite. Okay, so he was like a volunteer priest all the time, and we know that he did keep his vows, didn't he? All right, let's go on a little further. And they answered him, Jesus the Nazarene, and he said to them, I am he. And he uses that old word, ego eimi, again, which are to jar him a little bit. And Judas also, who was kept on betraying him, was standing there with him. Just keep on remembering that Judas kept on betraying Jesus. He was never his friend. Never. Jesus was his friend, but Judas was not Jesus' friend. How many of you ever had a friend that wasn't your friend? That you had friends, that you were friends with them, but they were not your friends? There's a word for marriage loving that comes from philo. There's a word for husband loving, and there's a love for wife loving in Greek that comes from philo. That means to have a strong affection for. Sometimes men marry women that don't love them, and they continue not to love them. And sometimes men or women marry men that do not love them, and they continue not to love them. And sometimes people get married, but they don't love marriage. They don't like being married. All right? Just think about that for a while. Okay, this guy Jesus was his friend, but Judas was not the friend of Jesus. And it says in the Old Testament that my friend lifted up his hand against me, or his heel against me, a type of the Antichrist, so to speak. When therefore he said to them, I am he, they just jumped backward like that, and some of them hit the ground. They were so shocked that he said, I'm here. You know, some of these people had never seen Jesus. Did you know that? Some of these soldiers, these were brave men, supposed to be soldiers. They were killers. They were mercenaries. Verse number 8 now. And again, therefore, he asked them, Whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus the Nazarene. And Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. If therefore you seek me, let these go their way. Now, what is Jesus doing here in verse number 8? What's he doing? Brother Mike?
Letting the disciples go free.
He wants them to be safe.
Yeah.
He wants his disciples, his church, to be saved. He don't want any of them to be hurt. Now let's look and see what happens. And the word might be fulfilled which he spoke, Of those thou hast given me, I lost not one. Was Judas ever given to him? Did the Holy Spirit ever give Judas to Jesus? Judas was there, but Judas's heart was not there. Judas had no inclination of the Holy Spirit, and every time he stole, it says that he continually stole from the bank account of the church. The church had a bank account. It was a bag. And that he continually stole from that bag all the time. He was always a thief, Brother Bill. This guy was not good. There was nothing good about Judas. Okay? Verse number 10.
Yeah, you know, it still breaks my heart, though, Jim.
Yeah, well, it does me too, but how many times you see people that? How many times you see people come to church for years? I could just name a lot of people that I have seen come to church and hear the gospel and walk off lost, and they were lost because they came to church with their husbands, the husbands came with the wives, or the wives came with the husbands, and they went home lost because they did not want to be saved. They did not want to be saved. Simon Peter, therefore, having a sword. See, now, he's armed when he's not supposed to be armed too, isn't he? All right, so here we got a guy breaking the rules a little bit too, Simon Peter. Now, there was one other one too. We don't know who the other one was right now, but... And he, Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave. Now, the reason why we have Simon Peter's name written down here is because when John wrote this gospel, Peter's already dead. He's already been crucified. He's already been killed. Okay? So he wrote his name down. Now, if they had written his name down in the other gospel, what was the earliest gospel? Who wrote the earliest gospel? Mark. Mark wrote the earliest gospel before AD 70, by the way. He wrote it before AD 7. He wrote it before the temple was destroyed. That's an early gospel. Mark's gospel is also called the gospel of what? Question mark. Come on, girls and boys. The gospel of Peter. Because it looks at Jesus through Peter's eyes. Okay? He drew the sword and he struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. It tells you which ear it was. His right ear. Okay, that's this ear, you know. He cut that ear off. Now, what do you think he was trying to do?
It's so interesting that mentions
The right ear. Okay. His right ear. So that means he came at him like this with that ear. And he ducked. Because what was he planning on doing, Brother Roger?
Chop off his head.
He was going to cut his head off. And the slave's name was Malchus. It tells us who it was. Now, if Peter was still alive, they could have taken this gospel right here and they could have tried him and executed him for attempted murder. Tried and executed for attempted murder. Verse number 11 now. Verse number 11. Jesus therefore said to Peter, "Put the sword into the sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it? I must drink this cup that the Lord has given to me." Now Jesus is going to be before the priest. Now again we have a wrong translation here in verse number 12. Brother Mike, how should that be translated here in verse number 12?
Or maybe writing my Bible.
Can you read through the writing?
Well, what you said, so the Roman cohort, which would not be...
That's not a Roman cohort. Pontius Pilate had nothing to do with this bunch of outlaws. This is not a Roman cohort. Who is this? Between 600 and 1,000 temple guards. Herod's guards. All right? And who organized this bunch? It tells us just a little bit earlier. Who organized this bunch of thieves and robbers?
The Pharisees.
Huh?
The Pharisees.
The Pharisees and the priest. Pontius Pilate had nothing to do with it. And so now we have the temple guards and the commander and the officers of the Jews. Doesn't say Romans, does it? How come they couldn't get that together? Because the word is the word they use for Roman cohorts, but it's not a Roman cohort, is it? All right. Arrested Jesus and bound him and led him to who? Annas. Annas. Led him to Annas first. For he was father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. So they led him to Annas. And they tried him there. And what kind of trial is this? By the way, this is an illegal trial. During an illegal time. And there was not time for Jesus to get a defense or anything else. They broke all their own rules. And when Pontius Pilate wrote his letter to Tiberius Caesar, he named all of the rules that they broke. Now Caiaphas was the one who advised the Jews that it was expedient for one man to die on behalf of his people. Now look at that little verse number 14 there. What in the world happened here, Sister Andino? How about Caiaphas said it was expedient for one man to die on behalf of the people? It tells us more about it in other places, doesn't it? John 11:50 and different other places, it tells us more about this. Why did Caiaphas say this? Why did Caiaphas say this? What happened to him? It says that the Spirit of God came upon him, and that he prophesied while they were trying to condemn him. He stood right up in the middle of them. He said, "Don't you know that it's expedient for one man to die for the whole nation?" And then washed his mouth out with soap. Probably lye soap, Marilyn. You listening? Homemade soap. Probably washing his mouth out with soap after he said it. He didn't want to say that. Why did I say that? Well, he was responsible to them, wasn't he? Was he responsible to them? And God used him, and God overruled him for just a minute while he spoke that. One man should die on behalf of the whole people. Some people have said, they said, well, this guy's got to die so our nation can go on, too. I mean, people interpret it that way, but that's not what happened. Okay? Number 15 now. John 18:15. And Simon Peter, who kept on following Jesus, and so was another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest and entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. Now Peter is following and this other disciple, and they know who these guys are. Because Peter's always sticking his nose out in front, isn't he? And always popping off and saying things, and has to take it back all the time.
And the other disciple was John, right?
Probably John. Okay? John writes that, the other disciple. And he also writes the other disciple whom Jesus loved. He'll write that because he loved him. And that word for love there is agape. That's divine love. We know that Jesus loved him like that. But Peter was standing at the door outside. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the doorkeeper and brought in Peter. And the slave girl, the slave doorkeeper, this is a slave. By the way, I've told you several times, and nobody's ever come up with the right answer yet. You guys are not very good historians. Did you know that? You're not very good historians, and I really try to pour this on you. What was the only, well, there were two very important men in America that were slaves. And they're white slaves, by the way. White slaves. What white slave became president of the United States? What was a white slave that became president of the United States? Huh? No. I always made you think. I've been telling you, go home and do this.
Andrew Jackson?
Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was a former slave, a former indentured servant, and he worked his way and got freedom. The other one was Benjamin Franklin. And he ran away from slavery. All right? Now, you didn't know that, did you? I've been telling you this. I've been throwing this at you several different times, and I figured somebody would come up with it sooner or later. Well, here is a slave that's not free here, okay? We had a slave that became president, and he wasn't black either, okay? The slave girl, therefore, who kept the door, she's a slave doorkeeper girl, and the housekeeper and all that kind of stuff. See, that's what she is. Said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" And he said, "I am not." Now remember what this is fulfillment of. Jesus told Peter at one time exactly, Peter, I'll die for you. And Jesus said, before the night is over, before the cock crows twice, you'll deny me 3 times. Between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m., you're going to deny me 3 times. Okay? Between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m., because the cock crows at 9, 12, and 3. Just like a clock. Just like the dongs going off on a cuckoo clock or whatever you want to call it, or when your chimes go off on a clock that has chimes and strikes the hour. Now the slaves and the officers were standing there, having made a charcoal fire. Now here we have, by the way, it doesn't say charcoal in the original language. You know what it says? What's it say? It comes from the word anthracite comes from this word. What's anthracite? Coal. This is a high-class coal fire. Coal burns longer and hotter than wood or charcoal. This is coal. So this is an anthracite fire. So somebody's got enough money to buy coal. Coal's expensive. And in this place, in this country anyway, wood was hard to come by. But they got a fire out here because they're rich people. All right? What did Pontius Pilate say about these rich Jews? He said they'd sell their own mother to make a profit. They had plenty of money. He said they pilfer the masses, manipulation of the masses, and made a coal fire, write down coal. You probably look over there someplace and it'll say coal, anthracite. For it was cold, and they were warming themselves, and Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. And I've heard 100 sermons preached, warming yourself at the devil's fire. Haven't you, Sister Andino? I may have even preached that one time or two. Warming yourself at the devil's fire. Number 19. That was an old sermon back in the 17 and 1800s. If you go on the internet and you look up warming yourself at the devil's fire, you'll see some of these old great preachers. I think even that great preacher in England preached this one, warming yourself at the devil's fire. And the high priest therefore questioned Jesus, kept on questioning Jesus, kept on interrogating Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. He's going to get all of them, isn't he? He wants to kill them all. And what did Jesus say when they arrested him? I'm going to let you arrest me. I'm going to let you arrest me. One time, well, 2 times in history, when officers came to arrest people, one time they were going to arrest Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and Virgil and all those Earps after the fight at the gunfight at the OK Corral. And this one old boy comes up and he said, I think it was Johnny Behan. He come up to him and he said, "You're under arrest." He said, "I don't think I'll let you arrest me today." Another time, when they were going to arrest Tom Horn one time, they said, "You're under arrest." He said, "I don't think I'm going to let you arrest me today." Geronimo said that too. "We're arresting you. I don't think I'm going to let you arrest me today." And Jesus answered and said to them, "I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews came together, and I spoke nothing in secret, in mysteries and secret, nothing cryptic. Why do you question me? Why do you question me? Question those who have heard what I spoke to them. Behold, these know what I said." My witness means nothing. You go get your witnesses. Go get your witnesses. Because first of all, they're going to do what? They're going to bring false charges against him, aren't they? Several times in Roman history, and Pontius Pilate himself said, and even in Jewish history, is that Jesus was more a friend of the Romans than he was of the Jews. He didn't say much too bad about the Romans. They brought him up here. And who should we pay taxes to? The temple, God, or Caesar? And he said, "Look at that coin. Whose inscription on that coin?" "Well, Caesar." "All right, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's." Well, it kind of threw him for a loop.
I never understood that myself.
What?
I never understood that myself.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he said, render under Caesar. Well, first of all, the government had to keep up the roads, didn't it? Isn't it right? What are all governments in history? How are they judged? How are governments judged? Tell me now. There are 2 or 3 little things. 2 or 3 little things that judge a country, a nation. Roads. All roads lead to Rome. The Roman government had the tremendous roads. And they went out, and before a king would go into any place but to view the people or to visit his subjects. They would clean those roads up and make them smooth and everything else, just like John the Baptist. It used a term that was very familiar to them, to make the roads smooth and level and with no bumps in them for Jesus. All right? So they did that. What else did they do? A government in all history is also judged by what?
Borders.
Armies are important, yes.
Police.
What?
Police.
Police, yes.
Here.
Police, yeah, police. But what else? What are the basic things? What we call of the infrastructure of a country? What? What? Yeah, you pay taxes to keep up the infrastructure. That's what it's supposed to be for. Taxes are for infrastructure. What are those things which you judge a nation by?
The economy.
Roads,
Oh, yeah.
postal service, libraries. Libraries is a place of learning. The most intelligent man in the United States, the highest IQ, was a man that hardly went to school, but he was a librarian, and he read every book in the library, and he knew everything. They want to close all the libraries down now. Remember when they took all the mailboxes away? You could go and mail your letter in a lot of places in Bakersfield until that fell on his face. Yeah, those are the things. Of course, army, but we're talking about infrastructure. You got to have libraries, you got to have a postal service, and you got to have roads. That's how you basically judge a nation, by their infrastructure. And a lot of people say, well, what kind of infrastructure does that nation have? Do they have a postal service? Do they have roads? Do they have libraries? You know what Umar did when he went into Egypt, Constantinople? You know what he did when he went into Constantinople? Alexandria, actually. The greatest library in the world was in Alexandria. You know what he did to? He burned it. He burned all the books. He said, there's nothing there worth knowing. This is the Quran, that's all. We don't need any of that. The greatest library in the world, they burned it. Burned the greatest library in the world. Boy, there were commentaries on the Bible in there that you cannot believe. They're gone. All gone. Let's go on a little bit further. Verse number 22. And he said this, and one of the officers standing by gave Jesus a blow, saying, is this the way you answer the high priest? And Jesus answered him and said, if I have spoken wrongly, bear witness of the wrong. But if rightly, why do you strike me? First of all, he wasn't supposed to strike him, was he, at all, until he was convicted. They couldn't injure a man at all unless he was convicted of a crime. He's only a suspect. And they're breaking the law because they are beating him. You don't beat a citizen. You don't beat a citizen. Verse number 24, and Annas therefore sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Now he's had one trial. Now he's going to go. He goes from Annas. Now he goes to Caiaphas. All right. Verse number 25. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, and they said, therefore, and you're not only one of his disciples, and of course he denied it. Then I am not. And one of the slaves of the high priest, being a relative of whose the one whose Peter the ear Peter cut off, said, did I not see you in the garden with him? Now he's in a lot of trouble. Now that was attempted murder. They could legally try him because he tried to kill a man. But what did Jesus do about that situation? Remember what Jesus did about that situation? Brother Abe, you remember what he did? What did Jesus do when Peter cut Malchus' ear off? He put his ear back and healed him. All right, no evidence. You can't try him, no evidence. He's well, no scars, no evidence. Okay? Verse number 27. Peter therefore denied it again, and immediately the what? The cock crowed. This is midnight. This is midnight. All right. Now at 3 a.m., before 3 a.m., the rooster's going to crow again, and he's going to deny him again, the third time. And they led Jesus, therefore, from Caiaphas into the praetorium. That's the judgment hall. And it was early, and they themselves did not enter the praetorium in order that they might not defile themselves, so they could eat the Passover. What a bunch of hypocrites. Could you see anything worse than that? The law of Moses says what? Thou shalt not keep on killing. Thou shalt not keep on bearing false witness. Thou shalt not keep on lying. Thou shalt not keep on committing adultery. They were breaking a bunch of these, weren't they? A bunch of these commandments. They were murder. Their intent was to bear false witness and to murder. Yet, here come the Passover, the Hasador, and they don't want to defile themselves by walking into a house of a Gentile. They're going to commit murder. They're lying, but they don't defile themselves by walking into a Gentile's house. Because they wanted to eat the Passover. They want to sit there with their families. And by the way, the Passover had been annulled now, hadn't it? There was never another legal Passover from this moment onward. Pilate therefore went out to them. He had to go out to them in the middle of the night. This is between 12 o'clock and 3 a.m., somewhere around there. What accusation do you bring against this man? This is the middle of the night now. Could they have a trial in the middle of the night? No way. And they answered and said to him, if this man were not an evildoer, look at that word evildoer there, we would have not delivered him up to you. And Pilate therefore said to them, take him for yourselves and judge him according to your own law. Remember in about 3 BC, what happened? What happened about 3 BC?
Killing babies?
No, about 3 BC. You know, our calendar is not right. They had to correct it and everything. Jesus is supposed to be born at 0. There is before Christ and after the Lord. Okay? Actually, Jesus was born in BC because they had to correct the calendar, so he was born before that. Okay, a little bit. But what happened in 3 BC? 3 to 6 BC. What happened?
Caesar died?
No. 3 to 6 BC. That's when the Roman government took over Palestine, and they took the ability to exact capital punishment from the Jews. Now, the Bible does say that the scepter will not depart from between Judah's feet until what? Shiloh comes, until the Lord comes. That's when the Lord was born. But they lost the ability to exact capital punishment. Okay? You judge him for yourselves according to your law. And the Jews said to him, we are not permitted to put anyone to death. Well, how in the world is this guy going to be put to death here in the middle of the night? You're going to have a trial for this guy and kill him in contrary to your law? Pontius Pilate is upset that the word of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying what kind of death he was about to die. Now, what kind of death was, according to Psalm 22, what kind of death was he going to die? In Isaiah 53. He's going to be crucified. He's going to be crucified by the secondary power of a Gentile government, which was the Roman government at that time, because the Jews could not exact the death penalty. Verse number 3, Pilate therefore entered again into the praetorium and summoned Jesus. Now Jesus, he goes in there because he's going to be defiled did Jesus take the Passover already? Had he already taken the Passover? Yes, he took the Passover early. This Passover week, remember, everything's all jumbled up. There's 3 Sabbaths this week. Jesus has already taken the Passover early with his church, and he turned the Passover into an ordinance, the Lord's Supper. And then he said to Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? Asked him a question. Jesus answered, Are you saying this on your own initiative, or do others tell you about me? And Pilate answered, I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation, the chief priests, have delivered you to me. What have you done? And Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting that I might not be delivered to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm, not of this dimension. Okay? And Pilate therefore said to him, so you are king. Now, this 18th chapter is a very beautiful chapter because Pontius Pilate turns the tables on the Jewish people. Those weren't a Roman cohort that arrested Jesus. These were Jewish soldiers. There's 600 to 1,000 of them. They went out to capture one man. 600 to 1,000 went out to capture one man. Okay? That's a lot of people. They meant business, didn't they? They wanted to murder this man. They went out with murder, blood in their teeth. And Pilate therefore said to them, so you are a king. And Jesus answered, you say correctly that I am a king. For this I have been born, and for this I have come into this world, to bear witness to the truth, and everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Now according to Pontius Pilate's own words later that he wrote, did he believe? Did he believe? Yes, he believed. Did he believe that Jesus is the King of the Jews? Did he believe that he was a Messiah? Yes. Did he convince Tiberius Caesar that Jesus was a king of the Jews, the rightful king of the Jews? And did he convince him that he was the Messiah of Israel? Yes. Did Tiberius Caesar, historically, did he protect the Christian church against the Jews? Yes. It wasn't so later, but he did. Pilate said to them, what is truth? He said to him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews. Now see, he has to go outside because he's going to defile these thieves and liars and killers and murderers, molesters of human justice. He went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no guilt in him. I find no fault in him. I find no indictment here. There is not one thing that would indict this man for anything. You have no case. That's what he told him. You have no case. But there's more to it than that. What does the law of Moses say? If a man brings a false charge against a person, and they find out, and if the judge says not guilty, what happens to that brother? These people. The verdict goes on the accuser. So he says, you are guilty. You are guilty of murder. You're guilty of sedation. You're guilty of all of these things. You are guilty, not him. I find no fault in him. I find no indictment in him. So you are indicted. Go out and stone each other. That's what the law of Moses says. Anyone that brought false charges against somebody, whatever the crime was, whatever the punishment was, they were supposed to be punished with that punishment. That was a real deterrent to what? Perjury. Okay? It didn't touch them one little bit. It didn't touch these people at all, did it? Is there a conscience among them? Verse number 39. But you have a custom that I should release someone for you at the Passover, your religious holiday. What happened on the Passover? What happened on the Passover? What happened here? What did they do? What's the Passover all about, Roger?
So the survivors left Egypt after Jesus went through and killed all the firstborn.
Yes.
And that's what they're celebrating, that they got out.
They're celebrating the release from the power of sin. Remember, Egypt was a type of the world. They're releasing. They're celebrating the release from the power of sin over them and slavery. You know, sin enslaves you, doesn't it? As long as you're in this body, you're enslaved to sin. You just are. I've been to churches where people got up and said they had to sin for 20 years. I've heard preachers say that. They were lying through their teeth. That's a lie. People sin. If you're alive and breathing, you're sinning. And these rascals were real sinners right here. You have a custom that I should release someone for you at the Passover. Do you wish that I should release for you the King of the Jews? Whoa! What was his finding in the court? What did Pontius Pilate say that he found in the court? What was his judgment? That Jesus is the King of the Jews. He is the rightful king. He is your rightful king. The impostor is on the throne, which was Herod, which is not one of the children of Israel, is he? This is what we call the nation of Israel? Is Esau's descendant a nation of Israel? You know, the devil works overtime, doesn't he? The Lord founded one church and the devil founded thousands. The Lord founded one religion, and the world is full of demonically empowered religions. Full of it. People are religious by nature, aren't they? But what do they want? A religion they can feel and a God that they can touch. We got a religion you can feel all right, but it's not all feeling, is it? But we don't have a God we can touch. We have a God that touched us. People have to have idols. You know, the Muslim world say that they don't believe in worshiping idols, but they got one over there in Mecca. It's called the Kaaba. It's a stone that fell out of heaven, which was basically Astarte that the Romans and the Greeks and all of them worshipped. And they go by there and they circle that thing 7 times. They have to do this Hajj, this journey, once in their life. And they go there and they circle around this 7 times. And they go and they touch or they kiss that stone, a rock that they're worshiping. And they say that's the right hand of Allah, the invisible God, that's his right hand. And they're kissing it, and all of their sins are forgiven. That's idolatry. I don't care what you call it. We have Catholics that go down and carry a picture of the Virgin Mary or St. Christopher or somebody, and they kiss it, and they kiss it, and they kiss it. Idolatry. This is all idolatry. This is in replacement of real worship. Jesus was the King of the Jews. He was the King of the Jews. Pontius Pilate's finding in this court case right here is that Jesus is innocent and that he is the King of the Jews, and you all, Jews, are guilty, and you ought to go out and stone each other. Therefore they cried again, not this man, but Barabbas. Who was Barabbas? He was a murderer. He was an assassin. He was a Sicarii. He was a head leader of the Sicarii. He killed people. That was his job. He killed people. He killed people. You know, these Sicarii went out there and they would go into some business and say, and to see if this is familiar. They would go into some business and say, well, now, you know, something's going to happen to this business, that somebody's going to come here and tear it up and everything else, and I will take care of your business for $50 a month or $500 a month or 10% of everything or 20% of everything, or like the Muslims did, 25% of everything, jizya. We'll let you live, but give us 25% of your profits. That's what you call protection money. Protection money. That's what Barabbas was. They would go into cities and the Jews and say, give us money, give us food for our soldiers. And these were the soldiers that were at Masada. This is a Sicarii. This is one of the leaders of Sicarii. You know what this man calls that they asked to be released? He called it, this man and his group caused the destruction of Israel. They went on to Masada, and because of Masada, the temple was destroyed and all of this. They went into cities, and sometimes they would kill. If they wouldn't give them this protection money, they'd kill all the men, women, and children in that city. And then he'd go to another one. He'd cut their throats with those daggers, those stilettos. These are the dagger men, the Sicarii. They'd go to another city, And then that city, the news had passed on them. They said, we want 500 pounds of barley, and we want so many pounds of wheat, we want honey, we want salt, and we want food. We want beef, or we want mutton or something. And boy, they'd give it to them. They go from city to city, supplying their soldiers. And they built that great Masada fortress, Herod's fortress. And that's where they died. The 10th Roman Legion went there. You can see that ramp going up there to this day. And when they got up there, they had killed everybody. They all cut each other's throats so that, except for 5 women and children, I think, was left. Not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was a killer. It says robber, but it's more than robber. He was a highwayman. He was an assassin, the head of assassins. Well, thank you for your attention today. Do you have any questions? Did this open your eyes to this chapter just a little bit more? All right. Brother Rex, you no questions. All right. Let's have a prayer. Now, Brother Dave, come on up here.
Real quick.
Yep. Just get right up there real quick.
On our announcement.